Okay, Oliver, welcome to episode 8. This is the continuation of episode 7 where we were building the lunar ground base or ground station, and now we're going to go ahead and fly it on up to orbit and get it out to the moon and attempt a landing. So one of the things that I think NASA's been doing for the last 20 or 30 years is assembling everything on the ground, slapping a docking port on it and sending it up to be assembled in space, like the International Space Station. And then inside that station they have been conducting all kinds of experiments for the last 30 years. And I don't know how much they've done in the way of manufacturing. Maybe they've done little itty-bitty science experiments on a small scale, scaled down manufacturing. Maybe they haven't. But now that SpaceX's Starship is getting ready to fly, and it can carry a whole bunch more payload, not only in mass but in cubic volume as well. Things don't need to be manufactured as small. One of the things that might come out of this that we might see in my lifetime is some sort of orbital base manufacturing plant where they can take parts and materials up to and then assemble in orbit and drop them up in orbit on a much larger scale. I think that would be beneficial to the space program. Once you have a larger assembly plant in space, you can start to learn about assembling things and manufacturing in space, which I think we have an idea on how we'd want to do it, but the small little idiosyncrasies that you would never expect, that would maybe be counterintuitive, you wouldn't quite really maybe get right on the first try. So we'll see what plays out over the next 20 years of spaceflight once it gets cheaper and bigger. So now we're about halfway out to the moon, and we're coming in a little bit high in our inclination, so we're going to go ahead and point downwards to aim more for the equator, and that'll bring up our exit point and really basically put us in a lunar equatorial trajectory, which we can then circularize. And as always, we can drop a maneuver node. We don't always have to. You can just know by this point that when you get to your periapsis or apoapsis, this is the most efficient place to conduct your burns. And so when you are getting a moon encounter and you're going way too fast like we are now, you just fly down to your lowest point, and just before it really, and you point retrograde, in other words facing away from the direction you're traveling. You burn, which slows you down, and then ultimately it brings your apoapsis down and you can circularize your orbit and prepare for a descent to a landing. And of course we have to say, because not every landing that your Uncle Steve does is perfect. So we're going to land in that area there. Hopefully it'll be nice and flat. And we're flying along. We're still way high up, 18 kilometers above the surface. So right now, when you're coming in for landing, you always want to kind of let your trajectory pass where you want to go a little bit, because you know that during the descent process several times you're going to burn to slow down. So wherever you really want to land, you don't want to aim for that on the first burn, otherwise you're going to end up short. You can see that our second stage there just impacted the moon and obliterated itself. Now we just want to kind of control our descent at about 40 meters a second. And as we get closer and closer, we want to reduce it to about 20 and kind of hold our throttle there. And then as we get closer, we're going to reduce it some more. Ultimately, we want to touch down nice and slow. When you start getting slower than 5 meters a second, things start to get squirrely with the space vehicle sometimes. And because of these weird landing gear that I made with abnormal parts, it looked like there was a little software glitch where it bounced around. And so I'm trying to recover here, but ultimately I'm going to fail. And good thing we didn't have any personnel on that. Now we can go ahead and pick up where we saved. It looks a little bit like we've got a Kraken issue going on here. This thing's hopping around all over the place. So now let's try again. Pretty sure I get it right this time. So we want to land there, so we're going to stop our engine a little bit earlier than that. Then we're going to conduct a second burn and use up the fuel in the second stage, leaving us about 1,000 meters a second, which is plenty to land. We'll jettison that stage and once again watch it fly off and impact with the moon. And we just want a nice soft controlled descent. So right now we're burning, but we're not really changing our velocity at all. We're just preventing ourselves from accelerating from the moon's gravity. We can slow down in stages on the way down. You can just play with the throttle here. If you tend to do things gently, you tend to stay in control of what you're doing. When you panic and hit the throttle too hard, things can get squirrely on you. So this time I'm pretty sure I'm going to go ahead and try to land at a much slower speed, like 1 meter a second or less, so that I don't bounce because of these Kraken landing legs. There we go, I did it. And we jettisoned the, the landing rocket. Now I'm tweaking the landing legs a little bit so that we can level this thing out a little bit so people aren't sleeping on an angle in their Kerbal beds. Just trying to level it out a little bit because we're on this slight incline. And there you go. Our moon base is here and we're ready for the next phase of the mission, and we'll see you there.